welcome everybody to Fundamental Roots and Friends. We have not done one of these in a while, Haiti. We've been a little bit on hiatus. So just to remind you who we are, this is Haiti Aguiar. She is the principal of Fundamental Roots. I'm Dr. Harry Wilkins, and I work with Haiti to put on Fundamental Roots. We do workshops, we do soft skills training, but we do live feeds because many of the things that Haiti and I talk about in our workshop and we've written about in our books is basically that physicians are humans and we have a unique culture. And oftentimes what we do, we have people join us for a discussion. And today we are pleased and honored to have Dr. Paul Lang. Paul, how are you doing today?
Great, Harry. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to give our listeners a bit of an introduction. So Dr. Lang, I can consider a professional colleague and friend, but he has an extensive professional history of being an intensivist, a medical director of a pulmonary transplant service, an ICU medical director. He's been a chief medical officer for a hospital as well. So he's got extensive experience, has moved around the country. I met him when he was at Michigan. And one of the things I noticed right away is that he wore a bow tie and tied it himself, which is my definition of the character of not only a human being, but obviously a physician as well. I typically will wear bow ties sometimes, but I've been switching it up lately. So Dr. Paul Lang is currently the medical director for Donor Alliance in Denver. And we had the pleasure of visiting his facility 2 weeks ago, I believe it was. And he was kind enough to take me on a tour of his donor care unit and all the good work that they're doing out there. And so we invited him to come on Fundamental Roots and Friends and talk about basically moral injury, sometimes known as burnout. But Dr. Lang, you may be able to explain why we as physicians don't like the term burnout. So welcome to Fundamental Roots and Friends.
Thanks, Dr. Wilkins. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Haiti, do you want to say anything else that I missed out of the introduction?
I just echo everything you said, Dr. Wilkins and Dr. Lang. Thank you so much for your time. Really excited to hear from you.
Yeah, so one of the things, I guess I'll just start right off. So we had a chance to talk about this a bit 2 weeks ago, but as Haiti and I were doing our workshop and you were sitting in on the workshop, there were some things that really were resonating with you as Haiti was going over physician culture. And we got into this conversation about when you were the chief medical officer, you were able to see up front some of the pressures that physicians are under, what those pressures are from, and how this can feed into physician behavior. And I wonder if you can just maybe address some of the things that you've noticed, particularly in your role as the chief medical officer, as it relates to the stress for physicians.
Yeah, and I think that stress is really relevant to us as OPOs who have to communicate and talk to physicians at a really challenging time when they've lost a patient or withdrawing a patient. So, I've never been fond of the term burnout. And when I talk to physicians, it doesn't really resonate with physicians great, in my opinion, and it doesn't with me. But clearly, there's an epidemic of physician distress.
Yeah,
and burnout is probably a symptom of that. But if you really look at the key elements of burnout, it's really physical and emotional exhaustion, a sort of depersonalization that a clinician undergoes. And then there's this sort of lack of sense of accomplishment or fulfillment in their work. And I saw this among the physicians that I oversaw when I was the chief medical officer of a large multi-specialty group. And it was pervasive, not just with the younger physicians or the older physicians, but it really was prevalent throughout our medical group. Surveys of some of the best healthcare systems in the country, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, when they survey their physicians for burnout, there's a 25 to 30% of physicians will acknowledge some type of burnout.
I think that's really key when you say will acknowledge. So those are the ones that are willing to admit that, which means it speaks to the possibility that it's a larger problem.
Absolutely. And I think that's where I came across the term moral injury. About 5 years ago, there was a paper, a little article actually published by Simon Talbot and Wendy Dean that really made me start to think differently about burnout and what they define as moral injury. And they make a very clear distinction. And they define moral injury. It occurs when we perpetuate, bear witness to, or fail to prevent an act that transgresses our deeply held moral beliefs.
Wow.
So, the concept of moral injury, goes back, really, comes out of the military, right? And I just want to say, I don't in any way equate what physicians are going through with what, our veterans went through in war, because it's not the same. But that's where moral injury really in the 1990s first became a concept, was with soldiers returning from Vietnam, who really developed a PTSD type syndrome upon their return. That's really the origin of burnout. But it wasn't until this paper by Simon Talbot and Wendy Dean in 2018 that they really started to make the argument for moral injury as a real issue among physicians in healthcare. And the distinction I like that they make is that, when somebody tells me I'm burned out, I feel like that's my responsibility. I need to be more resilient, or I need to, do yoga more, or I need to, do aromatherapy or whatever. And, a lot of healthcare systems have, adopted physician wellness and tried to build up resiliency. But I don't think that, physicians don't lack resourcefulness or resilience. We wouldn't have got where we are without being resilient and resourceful. So that's why burnout doesn't resonate for me. And I like the term moral injury.
Yeah, and I think that resonates with a lot of physicians. I think in my career, it's 36 years as a trauma surgeon. And, like you said, you don't get to where you are without, going through the rigors of medical school, staying up all night. You sort of, wear it as a badge of honor. Yeah, you can sleep when you're dead. You've heard your attendings tell you on call, you sleep when you're dead. The only bad thing about being on call every other night is you miss half the cases. I mean, all this stuff that's just mash. But, we do sort of pride ourselves on being able to take on a lot. So what you said resonates a lot with me, that, wait a minute, if I'm burned out, that's something wrong with me. And, you've been a medical director, I've been a medical director. It makes you sort of think a little differently about what sorts of things can you do organizationally to mitigate moral injury. And it's interesting that you mentioned, soldiers returning from war with PTSD. And I know I've had sort of PTSD myself about seeing multiple, it's like the secondary trauma, working in an inner city where you see multiple gunshot wounds, one after another after another. After a while, that sort of hits on you as well.
Absolutely.
But, from an administrator standpoint, thinking about talking to your staff about how to approach physicians who are maybe experiencing moral injury, what role have you seen in providing fulfillment? You talk about that lack of fulfillment, a sort of just providing that sense of lack of fulfillment and appreciation. How much do you think that goes towards mitigating moral distress or moral injury?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I've been thinking a lot about it really since you and Haiti were here in Denver. The thing that distinguishes moral injury in physicians is, and you'll connect with this, Harry, is that we take an oath to put our patient first, right? Under whatever the circumstances, what's best for our patient is what you and I want to do for them. Unfortunately, as healthcare has evolved in the last, probably decade or two, many physicians feel like they can't always do what's best for their patient.
Yeah, and for what are the reasons that we talked about this, but think about some of the reasons why that might be.
Yeah, and this is, I was a practicing intensivist up until a few years ago, and I had a real change in my attitude that many people noticed, because I think I was experiencing sort of these recurrent moral injustices. So, for instance, the healthcare system makes demands on physicians. You have to be on call so many times, and you have to generate so much revenue, and RVUs and productivity are in the equation now. So sometimes physicians can't spend as much time as they would want with patients. We know how to establish a relationship with patients, right?
Right.
And we build trust. And when a physician can't do that, that's a small moral injustice.
Yeah.
The biggest one for me, and I know probably for you too, is 3 or 4 hours of my shift was spent typing on EMR, and that slowly kind of eroded my my pleasure and fulfillment, that I could spend those 3 or 4 hours talking with families, being with patients, and I felt like the EMR was really pulling me away from that quality time that brought me incredible fulfillment, even though very challenging end of life discussions, and but just getting to know a family or getting to know a patient, understanding their life, and you can't do that in a 12-hour shift when you're spending 3 or 4 hours typing. I think those are the things that have eroded sort of the joy of medicine, really.
Yeah.
And,
I think we've heard that from other physicians as well. And I'm going to take a break here, Haiti, to see, I know you're monitoring. Are we having any questions coming in on the chat just yet?
No questions yet. We do welcome those on the chat for those of you watching. I do have a question for Dr. Lang, just to piggyback off of what was said. I mean, just from a nursing perspective, I think we can definitely relate to the painful aspect of the EMR introduction and the suck on our time and taking us away from patients, and the incredible frustration that comes with that. And I can only imagine when you're a physician who has multiple patients in multiple units or even multiple hospitals, and then you're having to spend all of this time vested in documentation. I guess my question is, for moral injury, do you feel, at what point do you feel like it propelled? Did it propel when EMRs came about? And how big of an issue is it in healthcare? How much, obviously we're probably biased about that, but I think it's helpful to hear from you, just having kind of been in that leadership role in the hospital. How concerned should we be about it? And what kind of long-term impact do you potentially see? Do you think COVID has made it worse? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, Simon Talbot and Wendy Dean have called, moral injury really the canary in the coal mine for healthcare. And I believe that. What's happening to physicians is a clarion call for what healthcare is broken. Let's just be perfectly honest. Healthcare hospitals have, things that make it difficult for physicians to put their patient first. Healthcare systems with prior authorization and those kind of things really frustrate clinicians. The EMR was never, think of all the money and resources that healthcare systems have devoted to electronic medical systems. We were told it would improve care, make it more efficient, make us more efficient. Well, it's done none of the above, right? Think of all the money that has been invested because, that's what we were told healthcare was moving towards. It's hard to argue that's helped the quality or safety of patient care at all. And we could have used that money to, I would argue, to do a lot better things to help our patients and also to help physicians. So, the best healthcare systems that are dealing with this are really, to your question, Katie, really, putting physician satisfaction at a high priority with their hospital executives. Just like you remember, Harry, when we always got patient satisfaction.
Right.
And it's like Dr. Wilkins, your patient satisfaction scores are blah, blah, blah. And even in my organization, we provided, some bonus structure for the physicians if their patient satisfaction scores were good. I think administrators need to really pay attention to their physician satisfaction and really try to remove those obstacles that we've talked about to allow physicians to take good care of patients. If you take good care of patients, a healthcare system will be financially viable and very, good quality and safety. So I think they need to trust physicians, empower them. I think physicians I hear, who I talk to feel, they're a small cog in the wheel of the healthcare system. And, that's not why, we devote, decades of our life to be, a commodity, right?
You use that term cog in the wheel, and it's amazing when I talk with physicians who are in that, they use that exact same term, just a cog in the wheel. And that's, Haiti, you may be able to speak from the nursing standpoint as well. And in our workshop, we talk about the whole thing about physicians are humans and you want to feel significant and you have all these other needs. I've said that, and I wonder if you resonate with this. I think that OPOs are uniquely suited to share this aspect of fulfillment with physicians, even though work with donors may be a very small part of overall physicians' work, but it's a huge satisfier if we are able to engage the physicians and let them understand the impact that they're having. Do you have any thoughts on that? Haiti and I talk about that. Do you have any thoughts on that from your perspective as a medical director of an OPO?
I think, you're right, Harry. We have a unique opportunity to meet physicians and families, sometimes on their worst day. So, when a physician is already in distress and then, we're meeting them on a bad day when they're losing a patient, I think we have a really unique opportunity to, turn the conversation a little bit. One of the things that you guys impressed upon me a couple of weeks ago, and I'd be curious about Haiti's thoughts on this as well, is, back to what I was saying a minute ago, physicians want what's best for their patient. So, and I don't think we've leveraged that in the organ donation world enough to help physicians understand that this patient wanted to be a donor, their family wants them to be a donor. And so really, we talk about saving lives through transplantation, but I think the focus, and Haiti impressed this upon me, is that we really have a unique opportunity to bring some fulfillment to that death for a physician by helping them understand that this brings healing to this family. And we know there's literature to support that with, helping with grieving and post-traumatic stress for families who lose someone, but their loved one becomes a donor. So I think I don't think we've leveraged that enough. I don't know. What do you think, Katie?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think OPOs, organ procurement organizations, have spent a lot of the time focusing on the outcome of the organs transplanted, because for the staff who work at an OPO, they're very familiar with all of the care the families get after the fact. They see how much, I remember hearing the story right when I first started at an OPO, where the OPO team went for breakfast after finishing a case and before hitting the road to drive home. And at the end of the meal, the waiter said, your meal has been paid for. And the team was like, well, who paid for our meal? And he points to another table and the donor family sitting there. And they had paid for the OPO's team because it meant so much to them to be able to donate, which logically doesn't make sense, right? Somebody who just lost their loved one, why would donation help them? But it helps them because of the legacy that's created for their loved one. It's not just ending with my loved one died, it's my loved one died and I think we've not leveraged that messaging with the hospital team. I think we think the hospital team wants to hear the outcomes, but like you said, a physician has that. We talk about building a love connection in many ways with that patient. And when the patient's no longer there with that family who they had to communicate things to throughout the care of that patient, and what they're going to remember is that last image of that family. And we really need to, I think, reassure physicians on how that family is doing so that physician can heal as well, and the healthcare team.
I think that's the part, Katie, that you mentioned, it so that the physician can heal. Because again, we're talking about moral injury, right? You want to heal from an injury. And I know, and Paul, I'm sort of like you, I'm away from the bedside now for a little while. I'm a CEO, but those memories of facing a family, which, number one, you talk about injury, you do everything you can, and then you lose a patient. That is a failure, as a physician, that's a failure. Absolutely. And so now you're looking at this patient that you've pledged to do everything you can. Now you've lost a patient. Now, as Haiti mentioned, that now transfers to the family. So if I can't do anything for the patient, at least I can do something for this family. And in that moment, all I can do is apologize and try and stop their suffering. And it seems as though to prolong that, to allow for donation, is putting the family through more. And as Haiti's story just mentioned, what the physician may not see, even me, when I was practicing, is we may not see that delayed effect of healing. That's where I think that big opportunity is. And in doing so, may alleviate some of the moral injury that physicians are feeling in general.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it, Harry. We've got to do a better job in the OPO world of really leveraging that aspect. Because I think I've never really connected the two, but I'm a big fan of the Compassionomics book by Tresiak.
Oh.
It's an amazing book that really makes the argument that compassion is really a drug that we can use to help heal. But on the other hand, I think if we could help physicians understand that by facilitating donation, that's an act of compassion. We're actually doing something that honors the family's wishes, that will bring a sense of compassion to the physician. And I think that could be a small antidote for this moral injury, because I define burnout as the absence of compassion.
Yeah, well, that's one of the three-legged components that you outlined, right? You have compassion fatigue. You feel like you're not making a difference, and you have this emotional and physical exhaustion. That's the three-legged stool of that. But compassionomics.
Yes, by Tresiak.
Awesome.
Really a well-referenced book. There's a ton of data on the positive impact that compassion can make, not only for the recipient, but for the giver. So
awesome. Well, I'm making a mental note here. I know that usually when we do these live streams, we focused on one component of our workshop, but you've mentioned data so many times, and I just can't help but to underscore, Haiti, one of the things we talk about, physicians and the 6 basic human needs, is that need for data. And I love this, Dr. Lang, I can certainly rely on you because you bring that data. You look at that, look at that face and that bow tie, and it's like, this guy screams data. I love that. So thank you so much for the compassionomics. I'm going to actually go look that up, and Haiti, maybe we can somehow attach that to the live stream. I think that's awesome. But I think for me, I think some of the takeaways from talking with you, Dr. Lang, is number one, that physicians don't like burnout. It's moral injury, and it's very relatable to, not that physicians are soldiers in war, but there are similarities. There's moral injury when we're not able to deliver the care that we want. Number two is that because it's an injury, that there is a requirement or a need to heal from that. And number three is that bridging that gap to have the physicians understand the healing that donation brings to the family, that may actually go a long way to heal that moral injury that's physicians are relating. And I believe, and Haiti, I'll have you see what you think too, but I've said this before, I think organ procurement organizations who basically own that process have a little bit of an obligation to that physician to bring them into that healing process, just like we do with the family, just like we do with the donor's family. And I think that's something we as organ procurement organizations can provide physicians in our service areas. Haiti, do you have thoughts on that or final thoughts?
Yeah, I would actually even say it's an opportunity beyond the obligation to bring that. And I think I like the two things you mentioned, Dr. Wilkins, of sometimes it's the delayed effect that of the value of donation to a family, because sometimes you may see a family saying no when you have a registered donor, right? But then we're following the families later on, and then they talk about how much it meant to them that their loved one did become a donor. And those are the stories we don't necessarily bring back to the physician who may have been feeling protective of the family at the time. So sometimes there can be a delayed effect. And I do have a comment as well in the chat here from John Carrier. Thank you, John.
Hello, John.
My belief is to partner with the care providers before, during, and after donation opportunities present. All too often, OPO staff are seen as creating more harm to families losing a loved one, whereas the intent is clearly the opposite. And I think, to John's point, I think part of that is on us, because we've communicated about saving other people's lives, and we don't, because we know how much we care about the families. But I think if we verbalize that, and then I just wanted to bring up one last point, Dr. Wilkins, you have mentioned appreciation. Dr. Lang, how much do you think us doing a better job at showing appreciation to physicians, even just with a simple thank you phone call or email or text message, do you think that has contributes and helps a little bit too?
Those are priceless. Any small recognition of the, again, it brings some fulfillment to the time, effort that a physician contributed, even in the context of losing a patient. So it brings some healing. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't really speak to the consequences of moral injury, and that's physician suicide. So that's a whole nother discussion, but we know that, there's been some just incredibly sad recent cases around physician suicide. And I think it is a result of this moral injury. So as an OPO, what can we do to restore that compassion and that fulfillment in what a physician, does in the course of them trying to save lives? But we can't always save a life, but we can bring healing to the family and to ourselves.
Yeah, if you put it in that way, if you think about it, we know 300 to 400 physicians a year in this country end their lives by suicide. And so if you're able to mitigate that through organ donation, then, we always talk about one donor can save, up to 8 lives. Well, you may be saving providers as well. Right. And when you think about it that way, so it really kind of brings home this urgency to provide that and bring that physician into the loop, because we know the physical fulfillment that it can bring.
We need to bring them in, because you know how it is, Harry. When the OPO shows up on the unit, all that means to me is I got more work to do.
Yeah.
Right. And so you've got a physician who's already fatigued and burned out and maybe experiencing moral injury. The prospect of doing more when you're already at your cognitive limits really is going to be a challenge to bring physicians in. That's why we've got to turn our attention to the family and the patient, their patient, a donor, to really make that seem valuable.
And maybe even think about the physician as an extended family of that donor. And because they are so close, that may help us in the OPO world to look at the physicians differently. That came out of your workshop. So John Carrier, thank you for that comment. And thank you all for everyone else who's joining. Haiti, I think we do have a book giveaway as we come to wrap up. Are we at that point yet?
Well, while we announce that, so for those of you who are still on, Dr. Lang gets to pick who he wants to get a copy of this book, and then I will mail it to you. So Dr. Lang, as you're thinking about as well, I don't know if you've already had some thoughts about how you want to pick who gets to win a book.
Well, I think we have to we've got to reward John for stepping up, right? And
there you go. Love it.
So, yeah,
John, you get a book.
Wow.
But way to go, John.
I love that. Well, John, congratulations on the book. And
John, please go ahead and send us a message with through the Facebook page with your address so we can get this book out to you ASAP. I do have one more question for Dr. Lang. I think I heard from a physician once that, and I'm sorry, my brain is going all over the place right now. It's firing like lots of different thoughts, trying to bring it all together. That a lot of physicians are very lonely people because they can't really discuss what they're struggling with at home necessarily, and they can't really discuss what they're struggling with sometimes with their peers even, or with other healthcare staff. And so if we are able to see them as humans, as an outside entity, for those of our audience who work for an OPO, because I've talked about, sometimes physicians can kind of latch onto you in a sense, not in a negative way, but in a positive way. I have found some physicians to really form close friendships, or not relationships, I don't mean it in the wrong way, obviously, but strong connections with where you become almost like a trusted person for them.
Right.
Because you're not working for that team, you're kind of like a safe person, but you're somebody who sees them as a human. Do you think that's something that OPO staff could offer as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, physicians are reluctant to be, I'll use the word transparent with the people they're most closely working with. Just to, it's a kind of a line you sort of set when you're working closely with people. But so, I used to develop great friendships and camaraderie with the cafeteria people or the house cleaning people because they were, again, recognizing what they do and what they did, and they would always be, honored and that a physician was, taking the time to speak with them, but they would always give me back more than I ever gave them. And so, to your point, Haiti, whatever the OPO can do to back to your, principle of treating, physicians like human beings, and the 5, essential needs of any human being, right? Safety, love, value, and so whatever small thing the OPO can do to connect with a physician on a personal basis is, you never know what somebody's going through.
It'd be life-saving.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the key, right? You never know what the physician is going through themselves as well. Yeah.
Well, Haiti, I think I'll like to wrap this up, but I want to thank you so much, Dr. Lang. Number one, for coming on to the program, but also just on a personal basis, just being who you are. You're so authentic. You're so, you've been through so much. I can relate to that. You're doing such a great job out at Donor Alliance. I think your team is great, is lucky to have you. And we just appreciate what you do.
Thanks for the invitation. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. So thank you for the work that you and Haiti do. You're making a big difference. And I know our team was really energized after you left. So thank you.
Great.
Dr.
Haiti, you want to wrap us?
Yes, Dr. Lang, thank you so much. I really, really cherish and appreciate, because I know time is precious. So thank you for sharing your insights and some suggestions and things that we can keep in mind. It's always helpful to have practical takeaways and just hear it from a physician who's been there, experienced it, and has dealt with it as well. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you to our audience as well.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for calling in. See you later. Congratulations, John.
Good night.
Good night.